Good morning and welcome along to Tuesday's OTBAM. It's Owen and Johnny with you here right the way through until about 9:15 this morning, and plenty coming up, as you can imagine, after a fairly hectic weekend of sport. We're going to be reflecting on the last of the talking points of the rugby in the Six Nations over the course of the weekend. Alan Quinlan and Ronan are going to be with us before we finish up this morning. We're talking golf as well. John Duggan will be with us later on to talk about Rory McIlroy's win at Sawgrass in the Players' Championship, and of course plenty of football to chat about as well ahead of the international break, and a couple of club football talking points as well with Daniel Harris a little bit later on. You can tweet us at Off The Ball if you've got anything you want to get off your chest this morning. Johnny Ward, a very good morning to you.
How are you, Owen?
Do you have like this sort of post-music festival blues after you come home from Cheltenham? Is that what racing fans get?
Yeah, it's something like that. You do feel like you need a bit of a holiday, even if you're just working over there, which I was. I went over actually on the Sunday. I ended up going to the Liverpool-Burnley game, and I got one of those really early flights because it was the only real way of getting to the Liverpool game at 12 o'clock. So I got an early flight on the Sunday. But I find increasingly if you get those early flights for reasons of saving 20 quid or something, you're just so tired. And I spent the whole week like completely feeling like I needed an extra night's sleep that I couldn't catch up on. So I was up every morning at about 7. I wasn't like, I couldn't really socialise particularly. You might have a meal in the evening or that, but by the end of the week, 4 days, there's so much emotion at Cheltenham, and particularly on the Thursday, so much happening that mentally you're just totally drained after it. And then I ended up getting a boat back early on Saturday morning, sort of 2:30, 3 in the morning, and that felt like that was like another world, really. It was just such a strange experience. And you almost think like, oh, is everyone on this boat coming from Cheltenham? And of course they're not. And the boat's an interesting experience. I don't think people get the boat anymore in general, but at that hour of the morning, you kind of have kids like running around screaming, and your love of children kind of slightly dissipates. And you have people who probably want to continue having a few drinks, and other people then who just literally run to get the next couch so they can sleep if you don't have a cabin. But I arrived back then in Ireland at 7 in the morning or something, and just didn't know where I was anymore in life or in geography or anything. And then I was compelled to come in here by Nathan and Dan on Saturday, which was the last thing I needed. But I'm just coming around now. Of course, then rolling into a bank holiday weekend, you're obviously, when you come back to Ireland, you want to have a few beers and relax. But it was, yeah, I basically need a holiday.
Like when you talk about the emotional roller coaster of Cheltenham last week, it must have been really, when you talk about some of the winners that we saw, like the great stories like Mullins finally breaking his duck in the Gold Cup, to I presume what would have been a rattled racecourse a couple of hours previous after what happened to Sir Eric. Oh
yeah, and like Bryony Frost, obviously she had the first Grade 1 winner over fences or hurdles, and Rachel Blackmore had 2 winners. Lizzie Kelly had a winner, so that was great for the sport, I think. But there was a lot of controversy on the Tuesday when amateur riders were put under the scrutiny of the BHA needlessly, in my view, for riding finish to a race where the BHA, which is sort of dominated by Australian personnel now, who wouldn't really understand jumps racing as we do, basically thought that the riders should have stopped riding because the horses were tired at the end of the race, and the likes of Declan Lavery got a 10-day ban for finishing third, which I thought was pretty preposterous. The Racing Post deals with that today a bit, and David Jennings also does a piece about Bryony Frost, about how important her interview was after the race, and she was in front of one of the English papers on the Friday. But obviously then, as you mentioned, Willie Mullins' an album photo. For me, Sir Eric's death was probably, unfortunately, the abiding memory of the week. It was just utterly horrible, everything that happened there. Horse never really looked that happy in the race. He just the sight of his leg basically hanging off him, and knowing that certain death was imminent, all of which happened after he had to be reshod before the race, which is pretty unusual to happen. It obviously happens, but he was like a pet lamb when all this happened. You know, he was so docile and benign, and
yeah, one
of those horses that just wanted to please. He only turned 4 years of age, obviously, at the start of the year. He could have been around for years. He really could have been anything. He could have been one of the best horses I've ever seen over jumps. I know you're speculating now, but he had the attributes because he had his ability on the flat. He took to hurdling like as if he'd been doing it all his life. And, you know, I started off the week sort of giving out about the animal rights lobby and how much, you know, how much of a role it has in the media over there, such that on the Tuesday of the Cheltenham, I'm not sure if it was the BBC or the ITV, but I was watching their main news story in Cheltenham, and their hook was the fact that Cheltenham was trying to cut down on its fatalities figure from last year, which I thought was I mean, it was a strange editorial line on the biggest day of racing almost of the year. But then by the end of the week, unfortunately, we had Sir Eric and people who had reservations about horse racing in terms of how the horses are treated and all that. You know, they're certainly their preconceptions were copper fastened by Sir Eric, and unfortunately, human deaths and horses dying are completely different. One is a tragedy. Horses dying, unfortunately, is part of the sport. But I felt really sick after Sir Eric, and I think everyone at Cheltenham felt something like that as well.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Even watching it in the office, I think everybody felt a little bit sick watching that.
Yeah, the press room in Cheltenham, literally, there was no. It almost went silent for about an hour afterwards. It was really strange. I mean, if something happened to a rider, and we've had tragedy at Cheltenham, particularly John Thomas McNamara, we didn't know the extent of his injury at the time, but we knew it could be serious. So you obviously have that time where you're not really sure how to take it all in. But with Sir Eric, there was a finality about that. He was dead, and you knew he was dead, and racing just didn't seem to matter anymore for the rest of the day.
Yeah, it really is a big shame. Put a real dampener on Gold Cup Day at Cheltenham last week. Let's tell you what's coming up this morning on OTBAM. We're going to get into the sports pages in about 5 minutes' time, or right now, really, actually. Ronan O'Gara in New Zealand at 8:10. He'll be giving his reflections on Ireland's miserable defeat, really, in Cardiff the weekend, and some reflections on the Six Nations as a whole. We're talking Jack Byrne, we're talking the Ireland squad and everything like that at around 8:30. The sports news then at around 8:25. Then after that, we've got Alan Quinlan coming up at 8:45. He'll also be giving his take on what happened in Cardiff on Saturday. Solskjaer and Fergie at 9:05. Zlatan Ibrahimovic has been speaking about the shadow of Alex Ferguson in the newspapers this morning. We'll get Daniel Harris's take on all of that. And then to round things off, at around 9:20, we'll speak to John Duggan about Rory McIlroy, who seems to be back. Before all that, though, let's get stuck into the back pages. And we will start this morning with the Irish Independent that goes with Lancaster rules out role with Ireland's coaching team. So Stuart Lancaster speaking yesterday about the possibility of going in potentially with Andy Farrell in the next Ireland coaching ticket. He says it won't happen. He says the reality is he needs it in place for January 2020. That is Farrell's coaching ticket. I'm sure he'll do that, but I said consistently I enjoy the day-to-day stuff here. I enjoy club coaching, and I'm very lucky to be at a great club. The sort of addictive nature, like I often think right now, what is Joe Schmidt thinking, other than what's going through his head about the idea of how things have gone so badly wrong for Ireland over the past couple of weeks. I'm sure he's also thinking about the frustrations that he's an international coach and actually can't rectify what's gone wrong for another 6 months, really, to actually kind of put things right. Whereas Stuart Lancaster is speaking here today that he loves the day-to-day stuff, that the kind of regular nature of club sport in any code, really, is such a positive for somebody who's kind of an addict of the game. Very much so, yeah. And it's kind of like friends of mine who've turned to betting on sport and maybe doing it professionally. I've always said, like, if there's no Irish racing for between Sunday and Thursday, and you're struggling for winners, you've no time to make. You just have to wait and wait and wait. And I imagine it is completely different ball game. And like Joe Schmidt, considering the adulation up until the start of the Six Nations campaign and the utter catastrophe that the Six Nations has been, the last thing he wants is a long break. You know, he may want that in terms of trying to rectify the problems, but I'm sure he'd prefer a game next week to at least put some right to the wrongs. And it just must be a completely different philosophy as well as that in football. You know, Mick McCarthy's obviously adjusting to this now. He's been out of that sort of game for a long time. It suits some coaches, it doesn't suit others. Yeah, for sure. The other story there in the back of the Irish Independent this morning is that Andrews has suffered a broken jaw. It's Paddy Andrews. He's going to be out for at least 6 weeks. He sustained a broken jaw as a result of Niall Morgan's challenge in Tyrone's victory against Dublin on Saturday. So yeah, saw the photo. A lot of interesting coverage of that, which we probably will mention in the papers, about Dublin and the high ball and all of that. But like, this was a thing that was evident last year with Dublin. You know, when they played Galway, even when they played Tyrone in the final, a few Hail Marys at the end caused them problems. But this is great news for Gaelic football, because it really is. I mean, you're a Kerry man, I'm a Galway man. We'd like to think we're from counties that have a chance this year. And with the narrative about football, the two problems football has had in recent years have been, I'm not sure which is worse, Dublin's dominance or the fact that, you know, the defensive game has become so dominant, and the fact now that Dublin clearly do look vulnerable. They've lost 3 games, whether you like it or not. They're not in the league final, and they definitely are vulnerable to a high ball. It's just, you know, watching Corofin on Monday, on Sunday, what was interesting about that was
Corofin played a style of football that had so many Galway fans and general fans purring, and you contrast that to Kevin Walsh, whose basic philosophy seems to be, when Kevin Walsh is managing the Galway team, the philosophy seems to be, we're giving up the football at an absolute, this is the worst thing we can do, is give up the football unless we're sure we're using the ball properly. And the idea of putting high balls into the full forward line, which inevitably means there's a good chance you're going to lose the ball, seems anathema to this Galway team, and anathema to a lot of teams where it's possession, and the old style of football still has a lot going for it, ultimately. And Tyrone went with Braun and 2 up front, and it caused Dublin a lot of problems. But the Corofin Galway thing, there'll be a lot of pressure on Kevin Walsh now, because everyone who watched Corofin will be saying that's how Galway traditionally play football. It was amazing to watch. Obviously, we will have those Corofin guys come back into the panel, but Kevin Walsh will be under a lot of scrutiny in Galway. Even though we're having a decent league campaign, most people I talk to in Galway hate the way we play football.
Yeah, I was just about to ask. There does tend to be that sort of sound coming out of Galway that there is an acceptance that you do need a certain level of pragmatism to get to a certain point. But then if Galway want to break the glass ceiling, that pragmatism needs to be shifted a little bit. The dial needs to turn a tad, as Mike Quirk puts it in the Irish Examiner this morning, and I think he's right.
Yeah, I've sympathy for Kevin Walsh, because I don't think his natural inclination was to embrace the style of football that we've become known for. But I think he realised that Galway, remember when we played Kerry a few years ago, we were absolutely destroyed defensively, and he realised that things had to change. But if you look at Malloy's performance on Sunday, he's just, the very fact even that he has a ponytail and he just has this kind of careless attitude or carefree attitude out in the pitch, where it's the old style of playing football with abandon. And I texted a good friend of mine about him, and he said, I can't wait to see him in Galway until Kevin Walsh puts the shackles on him. And unfortunately, I know quite a few really of the elder statesmen in Galway who don't watch Galway football, do not go to games anymore because of the style of football. Because of the style? Yeah, and this was even a guy at home wouldn't go to Tune Stadium, which is up the road from us, would not watch Galway football. So they absolutely would not. And these are diehard football men who basically watch almost no other sport, would not go to see Galway footballers playing under Kevin Walsh. And this is more likely to go 10 years ago when, say, you had them playing nice football. Absolutely. You had Michael Meehan in his pomp. 100%. It wasn't as effective as it is now. How effective?
Effective is probably the wrong word, as in yielding results to a point.
Yeah, well, no, if you look at last year, we won a Connacht title and we got to the Super 8s and we were beaten by Dublin. On the face of it, there's not a lot wrong with that, but exactly, I think, maybe we overstate this. It was kind of like Sam Allardyce when he was at West Ham or whatever, they'd never really liked, West Ham, this is not how we play football. And maybe sometimes clubs love this idea or fans love this idea of their philosophy, but let's be honest, Galway football has a trademark, and the trademark has not been, the trademark it now has is completely at odds with what our trademark was for years, where we did play, beautiful football. And I was born, I suppose, in the early 80s, but I remember mid-90s, Bosco McDermott into Val Daly, into John O'Mahony and those teams, and ultimately the John O'Mahony teams, the unbelievable football we played when Kevin Walsh was a mainstay. And nobody in Galway is certainly an awful lot of people in Galway would be very, very reluctant to watch this Galway team progress in the manner that it is now, and would really pine for those days when we played nice football. And you look at Malloy in the All-Ireland final and you're like, God, I'd love to see him play for Galway. But it's interesting. I think football certainly needed the Dublin struggles in the league. I know they've had a lot of they've had players out and they're trialling players, but I think it's great for football.
You think it's real, so?
Yeah, I know, I do. I definitely think there are signs of vulnerability there, and that high ball into the full back line, that just hasn't really been tested enough on them.
But it's perfect actually in the context of Galway, talking about it, because ultimately you look at Tyrone over the past couple of years, and I don't know, I wasn't particularly sold on the bunch of players they had. And now you suddenly look at a full forward line of Matty Donnelly and Colin McShane, and you're like, wait a minute, actually this Tyrone team is top class, and perhaps the style of play was holding them back a little bit. Do Tyrone have better forwards than Galway? I think there's an argument to be made. No, they don't.
Probably not, yeah. But, going back to the All-Ireland final last year, Tyrone really did not play that badly. And there was a lot of their football was very good. They were 4 points up, I think, in the first half. Little things at the back. The problem is it's very hard to defend against Dublin. That no team seems to have really managed that. When Dublin go on a roll, they go on a roll. And if the Cluxton's kick-out success has been such that it's very, and football has become such a possession-based game, but people who moan about football and say that it is where it is a game that's evolving at a really, really fast rate, and that's actually a good thing for football. I think, most people would say defensive systems now will get you so far, but they will only get you so far, and this is not so much that people are giving out about, it's just that the limitations of that style will obviously manifest itself eventually. And regardless of what you say about the league on, Dublin have lost 3 games, and they've lost in Croke Park to Tyrone. Now, to lose in Croke Park to Tyrone, to me, is a little bit of a wake-up call there, and I think it's great for Gaelic football. Because we look at that Kerry attack now, and we look at what Mayo are doing, and we look at Tyrone, look at even Monaghan. There are teams there who can say we have a chance, and that football needs it.
The Irish Times this morning leads with Six Nations, and it's Jerry Thornley's, that's the Times Ireland edition. Doherty is lined up for midfield role, says the Times Ireland edition. So this is Matt Doherty, could be asked to slot into a midfield role for Ireland in Saturday's European Championship qualifier against Gibraltar. That's what Mick McCarthy says. Now, this is something that we've been speaking about for quite some time, the idea of how do you get Matt Doherty and Seamus Coleman into the Ireland team? And the suggestion was that maybe, you put Seamus Coleman on the right of the 3 and you push Matt Doherty up into right wing back, or potentially as midfield. I do remember Keith Andrews, when he was doing the Keith Andrews show here, saying that Matt Doherty can't play on the half turn, that you'd be better off playing him as a left back rather than a right midfielder, even though he plays on the right flank, just because of his position on the pitch, and he's better behind the play rather than ahead of it. So it's an interesting one, and Mick McCarthy saying that it's definitely something they're looking at. Yeah,
but it's just been forced on him now, probably, with O'Dowda being out, because obviously he's had to make all these changes, but O'Dowda coming in from the right on his left foot, to me, looks like the logical thing. I wouldn't necessarily play Seamus Coleman. I'd prefer to play Doherty right back than Coleman, but if you do want to fit Coleman into the team, and he is captain, I wouldn't be mad on Doherty at left back. I think just doesn't seem to suit him. But right back has changed a lot, Owen, and left back has changed, because fullbacks now do a lot of attacking, and teams are playing so narrow that there's not a straight shootout with the winger anymore. So Doherty playing on the right isn't necessarily that much of a surprise, purely because O'Dowda is out. But the fact that we're playing Gibraltar just gives us a chance to do things that, I mean, if we were playing Georgia, it's very hard to be kind of trial and error around the place, because Georgia are going to put it up to us. This gives us a chance. But I've sympathy for Mick McCarthy. He's very little time to actually implant any sort of plan in general with this team, in terms of, we could play 3 at the back, we could play 4 at the back, we could play 4-4-1-1, we could play 4-5-1, 4-4-2, we could play 3-5-2. I think with O'Dowda out now, it's probably the logical option to put Doherty on the right.
Yeah, it's a soccer lead as well on the front of the Irish Examiner. It goes with "Take 2" as the headline. 23 years after his first time, Mick McCarthy leads Ireland training. And show of friendship. Kieran O'Connor leads from the front as GA World gathers for Ada Walk. It's a great piece by Michael Moynihan, who's down there for that, and just a great show of the spirit of the GA community once again. You've also got Crokes' Guiding Lights. Even in defeat, Magic of O'Shea and Cooper endures. That's Tony Lean writing this morning. And then you've got a piece on Rory McIlroy and Joey Carberry, and plenty more besides in the Irish Examiner sports supplement. And then on to the Irish Times. As I say, it's Jerry Thornley's team in the tournament. What a difference a year makes, as only 2 Irish make the cut. The fact that 2 Irish do make the cut in a Six Nations team in the tournament.
So what a difference a year makes. What a difference like 6 weeks makes, or whatever. Like the narrative from the New Zealand games to now, it's just an absolutely incredible turnaround. And as I was saying on Saturday, Willie Mullins, the difference of emotions he had in the Gold Cup, where he had three of his four horses in the Gold Cup were gone halfway through it, and then he ended up winning with the other. And the emotions he must have had in that, 6 minutes or whatever. But the Ireland turnaround is, we were odds on to win the Six Nations, and we ended up being a ramshackle. Incredible.
Like you talk about narrative there. Like, do you use that word deliberately, as in it's all overplayed one way or the other? The narrative was overplayed when it was good.
It is, but it was overplayed after the England game. It was probably overplayed after the Italy game. But was it overplayed after the Wales game? Because we've put now together, France were insipid against us, so we've put together, have we played one decent game in the Six Nations campaign? Arguably not.
Start to finish, no.
No, and the Wales game was atrocious. Now, it was kind of one of those days when a lot of things were going wrong at the same time. That's not a Joe Schmidt team, though. So many things were malfunctioning. I don't know. I'm not obviously a rugby man, but the fact that we were hot second favourites to win the World Cup going into it, and now you're looking at us thinking, ooh, where are we going here? And when you're talking about narrative, has the whole Schmidt kind of leaving at the end of the year thing made a difference? I don't know.
A comment in here from Danny Murphy saying, what did Mr. Sheehan make of the Mayo game on Saturday? I presume he's talking about me. Thought they were excellent. Thought Aidan O'Shea was outstanding. I thought as well, I sat in here 13 months ago and complained about how the Mayo fans treated us in Castlebar. I thought they were exceptional on Saturday night. There's a real kind of...
Mayo fans they're a great bunch. I
kind of love to hate them usually, but I thought...
Were you at the game?
I was. I thought the particular crowd of Mayo fans who travelled down were...
Many of them down?
They were just a great bunch of lads.
Many of them down?
A lot of them down.
They're incredible supporters. Incredible.
It helps when you see a performance like Aidan O'Shea, and I'm glad that I've had a couple of days to kind of calm down from Saturday night a little bit. I'd hate to be playing against Aidan O'Shea right now. Put it that way. I'd hate to be anybody, including a Dublin player, going up against that player in that sort of form.
Yeah.
But whatever James Horan, I don't want to call him the Aidan O'Shea whisperer, because Aidan O'Shea I thought has been excellent for the past couple of years, even post Horan. But he's been the Aidan O'Shea whisperer in terms of turning him into a bit of a bastard again. That's in the nicest way possible. Sort of like the way Fernandinho...
8:05 in the morning and you're coming out with the B word.
Sort of like the way Fernandinho enforces the thing for Manchester City. O'Shea did the exact same thing for Mayo on Saturday night.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I'm sure many people would have had a bit of an issue with it. I kind of had no issue with it. I was kind of looking at him and I was like, Peter Keane, better look at what Aidan O'Shea is doing and make sure that sort of grit is instilled in some of the Kerry players, because that is how you become a winner.
Yeah. I didn't see the game. I still have to catch up on the remainder of League Sunday, but I was talking to a couple of Mayo guys actually at Cheltenham. A little bit sceptical about Horan, that he's playing a good game with the media. He's talking up this team a lot, but they're not a million miles off. You would have to say that. And if O'Shea comes back, arguably still the hardest man in football nearly to mark if he's on his game.
Yeah, for sure. You got the top line this morning?
Yeah, this one is interesting. This is a Herald, John Aldridge. Salah alarm bells ringing. This is after the performance against Fulham. I mean, the horses bolted on the alarm bells with Salah. Salah's not had a good campaign at all, in my view. I've said this time and time again. I think in big games he's been very, very found out this season. In my view, he wasn't at it at the World Cup. He didn't get a break, and I think physically and mentally he's just not at it now. He's got 7 games without a goal, but in the 6 games, the top 6 that they've played this season, he's gotten 1 goal. That was against Arsenal, and Arsenal were absolutely rubbish at Anfield. And in Europe, I think he's done very little. He scored against Napoli, which I still think was a fluke. And he's hanging on by a thread there. I thought he should have been dropped early in the campaign, and it's kind of the reason I don't think Liverpool will win the league now, because he's not playing well enough, and they're just scraping through games. Again, apparently didn't play well, obviously, on Sunday, but...
Are you using the context of last season, though, to judge Mo Salah? He has still scored, 17 Premier League goals this season?
Doesn't really matter, Owen, though. They're playing... I mean, I was at the Burnley game. I mean, the difference in quality there... Liverpool are going to steamroll these teams. They don't need Salah to be beating Burnley and teams like that. He didn't score either. It's the games that matter ultimately. The games against the top 6 when he's been poor. I think next season he'd probably bounce back after a break. But this season, to me, he's never looked right. And when he's through on goal 1-on-1 now, you expect him to miss basically. And that was the case against Everton. And if they lose the league, that Everton game could be absolutely pivotal. I'm maybe being a bit harsh on him, but I don't think he's played well at all this season. Mix and match. This is in the Irish Daily Mail. Rory confident he can join Elite Club at Augusta, and McCarthy set to pick Doherty and Coleman, and that is kind of the main. I suppose that's the main headline from the press conference yesterday. Mix them up. Duo could start. This is in the Sun. Same narrative there. No more Ole Raps flops for playing like they did under Jose. Very poor performance. And meanwhile, Declan. I won't talk about Declan Rice actually. We'll get to that. Saving the best for last year. This is really sour taste. There's a sour taste in my mouth when we get to Declan Rice shortly. But the Mirror, the world according to Zlatan, and Zlatan is obviously talking about the kind of Ferguson, I suppose the ghost of Ferguson. I know he's still there, but Ferguson's shadow in the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer era. Sour taste. Chelsea boss faces more pressure as players fear the season is. And Mick, I could just wing it with Matt, which is a pretty good headline there. And this is the Star. Forget about Fergie's. Zlatan Ibrahimovic's exclusive. Alex is holding United back. Class of '92 need his permission to speak. Pogba's the best. Plenty of stuff from Zlatan, still relevant. Broken jaw for Andrews and Doherty's key role, and obviously that's the Star. If you get the Racing Post today, David Jennings is a piece on Bryony Frost, and he makes an interesting point that jockeys need to be better in their post-race interviews. That Bryony's interview was incredibly good for the sport when she won the Ryanair last week on Frodon. I think he makes a valid point, actually. I think she's very eloquent straight after. She comes off, she's literally still on the horse, and without, like, almost in one breath, she can give you an A to Z of what happened in the race. She's very fit, obviously, because...
That Ronan was like Pegasus, he's got wings.
Yeah, and but she reeled off this stuff like as if it was pre-rehearsed. This is disgusting if you're really having a struggle on after your post-bank holiday weekend. Young, gifted and English. That's the end of that paper.
There is, you've shown the newspaper away now, but there is a new bidder for Team Sky as well. So Team Sky is safe. Big, good news for Team Sky fans this morning. And apparently they're going to have more money than ever with the new backer. Britain's richest man is going in behind him. He's based in Monaco. And it looks like Dave Brailsford would have enough money in his hands to keep all the main parts of his Team Sky, former Team Sky, in place for the Grand Tours this year.
Sorry for not mentioning Team Sky, yeah.
Well, Declan Rice just kind of turns you off the scent of any newspaper at this point.
It's almost as if they deliberately put it there just to really piss us off. Like, it really is young, gifted and English.
Yeah.
And it's going to be difficult for us to get over that Rice thing, and just to see him in an England shirt singing their very catchy national anthem. Hopefully it's as catchy as he thought ours was.
Which is catchier?
Probably the British one, yeah. They're not. Neither of them is particularly. The Irish one isn't catchy at all, though, in fairness.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it was just a catchier national anthem. Maybe that's all this boils down to.
Very, very briefly before the games during the games on Sunday, Portnabuki, which is an amazing air from County Kerry, was played at various stages, and I was like, this could be our national anthem. It's basically an old air that's played on the uilleann pipes primarily. That's said to be based on the sound that the whales made off the coast of Kerry, like so, and the Blaskets and that. So the Portnabuki would be a famous old air, but it sounded amazing in Croke Park on Sunday, and it would do an awful lot better job of being a national anthem than Around the Veen.
Does it have any lyrics?
I don't think it has, actually. No, I don't think it has.
I know the tune you're referring to. It's a good one, actually. We should just start a campaign to make sure that...
Portnabuki. Not sure it would satisfy the unionists if we did have United Ireland, but it doesn't have any words, and it's a beautiful air.
Right, we're turning our attention to rugby because Ronan O'Gara is on standby on the line. Brian O'Driscoll was on Monday Night Rugby last night, and he reckons Johnny Sexton is on a run of bad form, the like of which he has never experienced at any point yet in his career. Did Joe Schmidt leave our halfbacks on too long?
Probably. It's a tricky one because both of them are not playing anywhere near the level that we're used to. Connors seems to be trying to play his way through an injury. I don't know. He's the only one that really knows how much it's bothering him. Johnny's definitely had a dip in form that I don't think he's encountered in his career previously. So it's trying to give them the confidence to be able to play through that, but then don't cut your nose off to spite your face. You know, you've got to be able to look at the bigger picture of it's not working for the team, therefore we need to bring in some fresh faces. I do think that if Joey Carberry was on the bench, he might have been introduced a little bit earlier than Jack Carty. You know, it's only his second cap. You know, he's a nice player, but he's not Joey Carberry. Conor Murray, again, you know, it's similar, even though Kieran Marmion's played well for Connacht in recent weeks and has never disappointed for Ireland, there's still a gulf between the two. So I think Joe's trying to give him game time to be able to get that confidence back, which just doesn't seem to be coming. So the only alternative now is that he gets a break from it like everybody else and goes back to his provincial team and hopefully he gets a bit of rest time or whatever's necessitated to allow himself to be close to 100% fit come World Cup time.
Ronan O'Gara, very good morning to you.
Hey Owen, how are you?
Not too bad. So would you go along with that perhaps Johnny Sexton just needs a little bit of a break to sort of press the reset button and he'll come back to the way he used to be, or is this problem a bit more severe than Brian O'Driscoll thinks?
I'm not sitting on the fence, but I think time will tell, and the fact that obviously he's going to get a break now and you're away from Test Rugby for a bit, so the likelihood is he's with the best team in Europe, so it'll be a great opportunity to regain composure and confidence, I think. And I know this is probably feeling pretty well. I think, halfbacks get overpraised most definitely when things are going well, and then when it rains, it really does pour. And the team didn't go well on Sunday, or Saturday, sorry, but the two halfbacks didn't go well. I most definitely agree with that. And It is very difficult in the fact that I think 2018 was so good and you had momentum. Now it's gone, so you've hit a wall, and I think the biggest challenge is going to be mentally. How do you get that back? And obviously, the other aspect of it is the fact that I suppose the two of them are in their 30s, and guys will be in denial about that, but there's no substitute for younger legs, and just you can have a few guys, I think, that are in the 30s, but I don't think you can have you can't be carrying too many of them. And I'm not suggesting that Ireland are carrying Conor or Johnny by any stretch of the imagination, but this campaign it didn't go well, and it didn't go well over a 5-game period. So there are, I suppose, big question marks over everything, really, and that's what happens when you play at this level of the sport. It's absolutely ruthless, and everyone kind of has to have a look at themselves and see how they get better, or else, as we found out, they've got beaten. So it's a challenging time on and off the pitch for everyone involved.
After a couple of performances like that, Ronan, does it get to a point where the question marks start to come over yourself? Like, is there a chance here that the likes of Johnny and Conor Murray are going to start to suffer a bit of a dip in confidence?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, yeah, confidence is key. I can remember it well in terms of when myself, Paul, Brian were playing. People would ask, what do you need a coach? You need a coach to get your direction. He dictates your mood, how you get out of bed every day, and he sets the tempo for your day when you go down for that first meeting. And that's not washing your hands of it. I think a lot of players, especially the generation I played, were very self-driven, and I think had a huge appetite for it. And I think the guys nowadays have, but I think what makes it more difficult maybe for this current group is the fact that Smith has been such an excellent coach, and actually has given them so much information in terms of, you do this, you'll get that. You do this, you'll get that. So perhaps their decision making, I would say, would be less than it would be for playing with any other team, because the coach has such an eye for detail and is such, I would think, and I can't, I suppose, comment with exact 100% accuracy on this because I never played under him, but being around the camp and listening to players, you can see that essentially they're so well prepped that it has gone well for them the majority of the time, but when it doesn't go well, as you can see at the weekend, I think their capacity to problem solve on the run wouldn't be anywhere near, I suppose, other teams.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. Like the term tactical straitjacket has been used over the past couple of days. Like the idea that perhaps Joe Schmidt is a little bit over prescriptive. Can he come back from that? Like, how do you reverse that trend?
I think that's maybe with the benefit of hindsight on. I think the fact, statistically, Ireland were the best rucking team in the world over a long period of time, and that was a major, I suppose, pillar on how the Irish team based their performance. So you can't be wishy-washy about your philosophy, how you want to play the game. Joe Schmidt's team is the best rucking team in the world, so they put a massive focus on, I suppose, the ball carrier and the two nearest support players cleaning out that ruck, while other teams would be a little bit probably more wishy-washy in the fact that they attempt offloads, they put people past the ball, probably a little bit more high risk, or depending on how you want to analyse it, but less prescriptive is another way of looking at it in that regard. But I suppose what Ireland has happened to them in the past few games is that, you mean, a normal penalty count could be 4, that's a triple, so that's a 300% disimprovement on where they normally are, which has massive impact for their game, because they're usually extremely miserly in the amount of, I suppose, easy possessions they give to opposition teams.
Yeah, like that would suggest to me then that if these Irish players aren't capable of carrying out the game plan to a very, very high level, the results can actually be fairly disastrous. That perhaps if you look at all the statistics, they're not actually getting hammered around the park, but ultimately there's a hammering on the scoreboard. Like, why is that, do you think? Do you think it is because that, say, another game plan would perhaps yield better results with a lack of perfection, or what it is? What is it? Because it's certainly hard for me to put my finger on it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, obviously, in 2018, okay, this was the team that with the way they were playing and with the way things had gone for Leinster and Ireland, it was looked at the real threat to New Zealand for winning the World Cup. Okay, now we're probably gone away from that, and I think the reality is we're probably somewhere in between. I most definitely think that there is a massive emphasis on the ruck and on work rate and on, I think, producing the ball well for the nine to get front football. But what has happened in the English and Welsh games particularly has been that we have been, I suppose, better physically. We haven't won collisions. We haven't got any impetus on the front foot, which means that we can't get our phase game in play. At the weekend, there wasn't, I suppose, any special strike plays, which we come to associate with this Irish team. And in that regard, you'd probably be a little frustrated as a supporter looking at that. But also, I think the error rate was high too, and that comes down to individual errors. You know, I think the way I look at it now as a coach, and looking at it probably differently than when you look at it as a player, was there structure right? Was it skill set errors, or was it mindset? I would say Wales were probably had a superior mindset in the fact that I think excellent restart, 4 metres from the touchline, driven into touch. Wales line out, moved to midfield. I think completely analysed what would happen. A beautiful chip, ball over, score. And there's absolutely no doubt that Ireland are a different team leading than they are coming from behind. I think their game plan is absolutely suited to be controlling the football, controlling the scoreboard. I think statistically, you look at Ireland, in all their big performances, have always scored first and have always led at half-time to go on and win. And I think Brian made a good point. And I don't know if we hear it in that clip, but I listened to him, and the fact that I think your tactics in the Aviva can be different in the fact that you can be braver and going for the corner, and that's not negative coming out of me with hindsight, but I think 7-0, 10-0 and a cup final away from home, you got to keep the scoreboard ticking. So, you mean 10-3, 10-6, we didn't have a penalty attempt, but we could have, there was opportunities most definitely to kick for points, and I think away from home under 70,000 people against you, it's a different mentality and it's a different way of playing the game. And I think if Rory Best maybe had a one thing from a captaincy point of view, I think potentially he may do what Paul O'Connell did to me and just point at the post and don't even ask your kicker.
Yeah. Like that's one of the big questions as well. Like you mentioned it there about the idea of Ireland starting poorly. I think it was something like 25 tests up until the Six Nations, or perhaps just in the Six Nations, that a Joe Schmidt side hadn't conceded a try in the first 5 minutes, and then it happens twice in this championship. It happens against England, it happens against Wales, and as we've seen, we're not great at chasing a game. Like, how do you shift that from a coach's perspective, Ronan, to actually being good at chasing a game? Is it something that Ireland can possibly achieve in 6 months, especially when there's no competitive games between now and the World Cup?
I think there is, yeah. I think mentally you have to address it as a group and probably get a bit of a brainstorming session with your players. Potentially do it with your leaders first. I think that would be a wise thing, because it's a very valid question you ask, because it's a complete different mindset in terms of, what if England score in the first minute? What if Wales score? How are we going to deal with that? And it was very obvious that the Irish leaders at the weekend didn't deal well with that, and it actually became more of an issue in the fact that the body language wasn't good among certain players, and the temperament wasn't good among certain players, and that's something that has to be addressed, because it's only going, the pressure is only going to be ramped up now if you're looking at winning the World Cup or performing to probably a standard that these guys have deemed acceptable for them. So I think with all these, well, not with all these, but as you said, the one I think great learning they can get out of the weekend is the question you asked there. How do you chase a game with the tactics they have, and the fact that I think their game is set up for controlling the ball and scoring and dictating tempo. But if that happens, have the capacity to stray from focusing completely on playing a ruck game to potentially playing an offload game.
Mm-hmm. And like you've got to look at the leaders on the pitch. Like we've spoken about Sexton there, like with Rory Best as captain and with the leadership core, there's more that they can be doing, Ronan, isn't there, in terms of perhaps arresting that decline within a game?
Yeah, no, I would say this one was, and I've been there as a number 10 in this situation before. A lot of these guys haven't, though, and you have to remember that as well. They haven't, under Joe Schmidt reign, I don't think they've had a performance or a feeling like this. While from our era, we would have been in this position against the All Blacks once, where we got thumped from the first minute and we couldn't stop the slide. And it's very hard at this stage to, at any level, especially this level, to arrest the slide when you give momentum to a team that have the bit between their teeth. And I'm not answering your question, but I think it is something that has to be really addressed, because it will happen again. Maybe not to the extent, but you look at it in terms of the England game was probably very different in terms of as good as England were in the day, the game was still alive after 65 minutes. In this game, when Ireland went 10-0 down and they didn't kick at goal, it was a 2-score game that got bigger and bigger and bigger. And at the 25-7 is quite flattering in the fact that it could have easily been 32-0.
Yeah.
And that probably was probably a reflection on the one-sidedness of the game. But these players over a 4 or 5 year period haven't had their foot in their throat like that ever. So it's probably good that the Six Nations is over now, that they can get away from it. And as I spoke to you a few weeks ago, I think there was always going to be a few stages before the World Cup in terms of the Six Nations. Then there's the European Cup campaign. Then there's the the World Cup warm-up games, the 4-game period there, which now is absolutely crucial in the fact that form has to be found there, because the form isn't there, and that's their period, I would say, to put the demons to bed. And then, because if they're still rumbling under the surface, you can be sure once it becomes a 1-score game in the World Cup, they can come back to haunt you very quickly, which I know all too well about from 2007.
Yeah.
How do you think Ronan Sexton will respond psychologically, just from being Player of the Year at one moment, and then the next minute his position is almost, people will start saying, well, how long is Johnny Sexton going to be our starting out half? And just psychologically, can he get over that bridge? Because he must wake up, this morning now in a pretty dark place in some respects, wondering like, where is this going to go for him?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question to ask. But I think where he goes from here, I think is he can decide. But also, I think depending on how he reacted after winning the World Player of the Year. I think Johnny would be first to realise he was number 10 in a team that remained unbeaten for the year, in the fact that his individual game was very good. I would have also probably factored in the fact that Conor Murray could have easily received that award, in the fact that I thought at the time it was easier for people to say that Conor Murray was better than Aaron Smith as opposed to Johnny Sexton over Bowden Barrett. I think you can have that argument can go either way on an individual basis. Bowden Barrett is an absolute incredible rugby player. maybe the All Blacks in 2018 weren't the force that they have been. But I think Conor Murray also, depending on how you look at it, and I probably have a little bit of a Munster bias in the fact that he had an exceptional 2017 and 18, and he could have won that. So getting back to your question, I think if Johnny was smart, which he is a really smart guy, he would have acknowledged that I think I'm in this position because of my teammates and because of what Irish Rugby has done and because of how well I have played and because I'm such a good competitor. But central to that has probably been how much of a competitor I am. I think now he has seen that when things aren't going well around him, he has to maintain his high standards, and he's let himself down in that regard, I would say, and the fact that his own individual performances haven't been where he'd like them to be. And I'd say, knowing how honest he is, he'd be the first to acknowledge that. But it's an 8-week period and great players respond. But now we have to see what the reply is. I think he will reply, most definitely. I think the short-term response will be huge out of him. I genuinely believe that. I think when it means so much to a guy, you have different ways of showing it. And, I think sometimes he misinterpreted Johnny would be in the fact that he has a sour head in him. And I had that head in me too, but I think it means so much to him to win. And I asked him about pushing and shoving Joey Carberry in down in Thomond Park. I said, Johnny, that doesn't look good. And he said, I caught him unawares. I didn't realise that he wasn't kind of actors on, and he fell a bit. So in that regard, I think he sometimes underappreciates how much of a leader he is to other people, because he gets so caught up in the moment of being a driven professional, and he needs to get better at that, I think. But he'd be the first to acknowledge that he's trying to get better at it, and I think he will get better at it. But I think what he needs to do now is probably just narrow in his focus on getting his performance right, and then as a result the team will get better, as opposed to maybe him looking at it in the fact that I need a team to get better for me to look good. If that makes sense to you.
Yeah, no, it does. It's very interesting stuff. Listen, Ronan, thanks a million for taking the call. We'll chat to you again soon.
Cheers. Good luck, lads.
Ronan O'Gara there, live on the line from New Zealand. It is just such a tough one to actually kind of pick areas now where Ireland can actually look at and kind of tangibly improve in before the World Cup, that all of a sudden things are looking very, very grim. And maybe there's an overreaction on that side, as you mentioned at the start of the show, that the narrative perhaps was too positive this time last year, and maybe it's too negative now. I'm not so sure. I just think that there's some areas of that team that maybe you can't really arrest declines in certain areas or disimprovements in certain areas.
Like he makes a good point about Sexton. Sexton does not have age on his side here, and I think one of the problems Schmidt had in the campaign was that he didn't have Carberry basically as a backup after that Scotland game, and Carberry's second half against Scotland was kind of, you'd almost say, like the France game was probably based on France being so bad, but the Scotland second half and Carberry's turnaround from his first half was probably the one sort of bright spot of the campaign, you could say, because Carberry's going to be our out half sooner or later. And from my limited understanding of rugby, watching Finn Russell and watching Carberry has off the cuff stuff that you just can't teach. He's that absolute X-rated brilliance. We didn't have that. We didn't have any of that to come because of his injury. Then if Sexton is having a bit of maybe even a meltdown, you saw Carney as well. Didn't have a good campaign. Full back is a situation. Scrum half, not a good campaign. So a lot of the back line is not functioning. And then you have all the other issues when the whole world is almost falling in on you. Things are going to malfunction someday badly, like they did against Wales. But Sexton, I thought it was interesting to hear him there. Just Sexton really is at that moment where you've gone from that high of being World Player of the Year to, everyone envies professional sports people, but like last Sunday morning, it wasn't that nice being Johnny Sexton.
No.
And it wasn't that nice being Joe Schmidt either. Because Joe Schmidt, if he goes for his local coffee in Dublin or wherever, he's not going to get the adulation that he was getting since he's been here.
That's for sure. And the tricky thing from him, as I've said, is that he doesn't put on the Leinster jersey now next week. At least Johnny Sexton can do that, and he can arrest it. From a Schmidt perspective, it's going to be, I'd say, fairly testing 6 months for him. Right, we're turning our attention to football, and it is the international break. And Mick McCarthy explained to Stephen Doyle at the Republic of Ireland press conference yesterday why he drafted Shamrock Rovers midfielder Jack Byrne into the Ireland squad this week.
I go and look at the players. I go and watch the games, and I saw him. He was outstanding there the other night. I think he'll have, harder time opposition. But even in training this morning, you can see he's more than capable of mixing it with the lads there. So I guess if I'd have seen him the last time and he'd have played like that, I'd have had confidence in him then. But I didn't see anybody like that. So I guess that's the benefit of going to watch the games. It was excellent performance Friday night.
Yeah, Jack Byrne, very impressive in his return to Ireland, playing for Shamrock Rovers at the moment. A deserved call-up, I think.
This is fantastic for the League of Ireland, Owen, and obviously for Jack himself. We're very biased as League of Ireland people, where for many years we've been deeply insecure about the product that we pontificate about week in, week out, and for much of I suppose my life supporting it, you're kind of flogging a dead horse in a way, in that the football wouldn't have been great, but it's not like that anymore. We had Alan Manus recently, the Shamrock Rovers keeper, saying that when he was playing in the SPL, which he was playing up until I think last year, he said every time he was kicking out the ball, he'd have to go long. In the League of Ireland, when he has to kick the ball out, he's always going short. And he said that was the one thing I had to get used of coming back to Ireland. That's a seismic shift where we're talking about. And the SPL is not a bad league. So we have a situation now where a lot of football is played, and central to that has been Shamrock Rovers, and Stephen Bradley, their coach, is very much, he's probably learned on the job, but he's definitely brought in a lot of ball playing players into his team, such that he could have 6 or 7 almost number 10s playing at the moment, and Jack Byrne is one of them. Jack is a very brash, confident guy, but when you watch him play alongside the likes of Aaron McInniff, Ronan Finn, Dylan Watts, Greg Bulger, and all these players, you can see that he's playing with technically good players. And I've massive respect for Mick McCarthy. I know he's on good money, but he could have ignored the League of Ireland. He could have done what Giovanni Trapattoni did. He could have played more of a tokenistic kind of reverence towards it, as did his predecessor. But Mick McCarthy's been at game after game after game this year, most of which haven't been that good, because I've been there as well. He probably saw a very good performance from Jack Byrne the other night, and notwithstanding the fact that Sligo didn't raise a gallop, he could see, as he should be able to see, that this player has ability. Jack Byrne's pedigree is very, very good. If you go back far enough, there are many stories about his temperament, and I don't think it's the biggest issue with Jack, because temperament, for he's not a guy who's going to kick somebody and get sent off, or he's not a guy who's going to down tools. He's just very, very confident, and this has been evident since he was a kid. And I spoke to Sean Kavanagh. I think Sean Kavanagh, he was actually instrumental in the brilliant goal he got at the weekend. Sean Kavanagh, I think, travels with him to training every day, and he said, I really like Jack. He is what he is, but I really like him. And like, there are stories in pre-season where he was kind of, tapping Ronan Finn in the back of the head, kind of, saluting him for a good pass that he gave. Ronan Finn is like, 31 or 32, he's a seasoned pro, and Jack has this real, I'm an upstart and I don't really care what you think about me type attitude. But he was taken off at half time in the Bows game when they sacrificed him because they were down to 10 men. I thought that was very harsh, and I could only wonder what his reaction was, because he was taken off with about 10 minutes to go in the Pats game when they were 1-0 up, and he threw a bit of a huff coming off the pitch. So he has that in him, but it doesn't surprise me that technically he was well up to playing in training and all that. And for League of Ireland players, to see somebody in a gruff English accent saying that Jack Byrne was good enough to get on this team because of what I saw against Sligo Rovers, that's so uplifting. And also for players who are in England who may be struggling and thinking, if I go back to Ireland and do what Jack Byrne did, I could get immediately called up into a competitive Irish squad. And for the League of Ireland, this is massive, and we may or may not talk about how the FAI is running the game at the moment, but the league itself, without any prize money from the FAI and without any TV money, is slowly from within becoming a very much a league that's respected elsewhere, which is great, and Jack's call-up is a great sign of that.
Maybe Ireland needs more of those types of characters, fellas that have...
Jack Byrne.
Yeah, fellas that have such a belief in their own ability.
Yeah, he does, and that's the thing. You go along to the game, and Jack's always very entertaining to watch, and that doesn't always include when he has the ball, because he just has that manner about where he's kind of, he struts himself about, but he's the quality of his goal at the weekend, it's a quick 1-2 off a throw, top corner, the style of his passing. Now, this is all couched by the fact that he had a lot of time to do what he wanted against Sligo. When he played Dundalk, he didn't do as much. When he played against Pats and Bows, he didn't do as much, so stronger tests ahead. But when he was at Man City, there are stories of him as a 16-year-old and being well able to talk, and he said, I'm going to be, I think the lines he used to come up with, I'm going to be a star or whatever. Now Jack has, yeah, absolutely. And what I liked about the goal against Sligo is he went over and immediately embraced Stephen Bradley, and Bradley kind of gave him a hug, and there was probably an element of Stephen Bradley thinking, I'm not sure if I expected this, I'm not sure how to react, but Jack is kind of infectious as well, I'd say. I'd love to have him in my team because of his quality, and I'd realise the fact that he's a cocky so-and-so at the best of times, but I actually genuinely think he could get a run against Gibraltar now, because McCarthy is very much devoid of options in that area. He's fairly lacking options, and it's not a bad game. As long as we're 2 or 3-0 up, something like that, he might give him a run. And it's not piecemeal, it's not tokenistic, and it's not just doing it for the sake of kind of a nod to the League of Ireland lobby. He brought him in because he thought he was good enough.
Yeah, David McGoldrick and James Collins, they were also speaking in the media this week. Here's McGoldrick on his relationship with the previous Republic of Ireland management.
No, I think people are searching for something there. I think it's just down to form with players coming into the squad, Shawnee Maguire, Scotty Hogan, Aidan O'Brien, Ronan Curtis, all young boys coming through. He wanted to look at them. I wasn't doing the business. I know we had a conversation after one of the games, the Moldova games, I think it was. I didn't get on the bench, and we spoke about it, and that was it. I think people are trying to reach out for something, argument that was never there. I got great respect from Martin and Roy, the staff. They gave me my debut at USA some 4 years ago, I think it was. I'm always being an honour to them for doing that. They've had great careers on coaches and players, and I hold them in high regards.
That conversation when you weren't on the bench, was that you saying, why wasn't I on the bench, or the manager telling you why you weren't? Who initiated
He's
that?
pulled. Obviously, you have conversations about when you don't make the bench with Mick will have it. Our gaffer Mick will have it on Saturday. If someone doesn't get it every week, there's a conversation with players before games why they're not getting selected, and players are unhappy. Every player wants to play, and it's no different. I wasn't happy that I wasn't playing, but there was no fallout. We spoke about it, and we went and had breakfast after. There's nothing. There's no difference. It's just football. There's conversations every day, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, James Collins and David McGoldrick there speaking at Republic of Ireland media session yesterday. Darren Cleary, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Colin. Very well.
Are you excited for the new era of Irish football?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of positivity around. I mean, last year was just so grim. It was so hard to find any kind of solace. Sadly, the solace was in Declan Rice and his emergence as a Republic of Ireland international.
That's true.
And even that has been snatched away from us cruelly. So
he's young, talented and English now.
Yeah, he's all of those.
Gifted, sorry. How did the Guardian describe him?
He's English.
That's kind of the main takeaway from it. Like he speaks about the kind of idea of discontent in that Ireland camp being a little bit overplayed. One thing is for sure, it does seem that even if there was no discontent in the previous Irish camp, there is.
There was though.
Well, there certainly was. There was a WhatsApp message and all that, blah blah blah.
There was a WhatsApp message. There was one player who literally refused to come for a competitive game.
What we can, from the outside looking in, you can kind of get a sense of how frosty things are within the camp. Right now, I think things are pretty content in the Ireland camp. I'm not sure, is that just the way Mick McCarthy has about him, or is it just, shiny new manager, everybody's happy?
I'd be a bit of both though, and like Robbie Keane being there as well. Robbie was the guy who would put people in good form. I think Terry Connor, TC as he calls him, is a guy that they'd respect as well. But Mick also will bring a lot of these guys' memories back to following Ireland when Mick was in charge, and very good memories. And Mick is a good man, and he's also probably some sort of a training regime that is at least a little bit better than the predecessors one, because they might actually know how to defend corners now, for one thing. And you couldn't put, Owen, it's kind of like coming out of a dictatorship into some sort of a democracy. Things have to improve because they can't get any worse.
Yeah, before we get into your bulletin, Darren, there's been a comment from Gavin Andrews challenging you on Mo Salah, Johnny. He came back has the weight of your Egyptian sponsorship debacle on his shoulders, getting double and triple marked every game, still got 16 for the season. Yeah, shocking season altogether.
No, I think I've responded to Darren. I'd agree with what he's saying there, in the sense, Gavin rather, I'd agree with what he says about came back injured, has the weight of Egyptian sponsorship debacle. All of that stuff is true. Getting double marked and triple marked is slightly true, but that doesn't forgive him the chances that he's missed and how out of sorts he's been in a lot of games, just in terms of his body language. I think next season, Gavin, I think he will come back better next season. I wouldn't have any faith in him doing much for Liverpool this season.
Darren, what's going on?
Yeah, James Collins believes that the club form of the current Republic of Ireland players bodes really well for the boys in green. They're back on the training pitch later as preparations ramp up ahead of the Euro 2020 qualifiers, first with Gibraltar and then Georgia. Collins himself is in fine form. He scored 20 goals this season to help League One Luton Town establish a 5-point lead at the top of the table. Collins feels the players will be full of confidence, with a number of them doing well at their respective clubs.
a lot of conversations started in the week with boys saying, "Oh, you boys are flying, like, and it seems to be a common thing throughout the squad, which can only be good for the squad, and going into these 2 games with most players in the squad doing really well at their club level. So hopefully that can continue and we can get some good results. I always knew that you had to be at a certain level to have any realistic chance of getting in with the calibre of strikers that Ireland have had. So I always did look, and I always supported when they were playing. But I'm really grateful that Mick's gave me a chance for this campaign.
The FAI have refused to answer questions about the €100,000 loan given to the association by its CEO, John Delaney. They released a statement last night to say they had received a number of questions in relation to this loan. Instead of responding to the queries directly, the association reiterated their earlier statement. They say the FAI is currently undertaking a full review of its executive governance and senior management structures. The review will be completed and all actions approved by early April, when a full press conference will be held to reveal all outcomes. In the meantime, the association reiterates that the bridging loan was made in the best interests of the FAI in 2017 when it experienced a short-term cash flow issue. The board of the FAI has been kept fully informed in relation to this matter at all times.
I should have mentioned this earlier as well. The Sun just claims that the loan hearing to cost, this was the failed High Court injunction when it was an attempt to I basically prevent the Sunday Times from doing the story. That's going to cost 50 grand or thereabouts according to the Sun, but it's fine because the FAI board were obviously aware at all times.
It'll be interesting to see those questions put to him next month.
Yeah, it's going to be. I think the FAI is quite fortunate in a way that Mick McCarthy's era is garnering so many headlines now because there are so many questions to ask about this. We could literally spend the day talking about it. It's really, really, really questionable what's going on here, and the FAI is not coming out well at all. The more statements it gives out, the worse it seems to get.
Yeah, I think Aidan Fitzmaurice had a list of questions in the Herald yesterday.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong, they're available online. They're worth taking out there. Brilliant, and I'm sure that the people who are conducting the Oireachtas committee could do a lot worse than just read from that.
Yeah, because funny, I know a lot of these Oireachtas committees, I've seen them in the past, they can be pretty poor at actually getting to the heart of what the whole thing was set up for in the first place. I've seen this back in the day with racing as well, where the proper questions probably weren't really asked, but to put it mildly, some serious questions need to be asked about this. Serious questions. Not least, where's the 50 grand going to come from to pay for what happened on Saturday? That's only the tip of the iceberg. And meanwhile, the League of Ireland champions get 110 grand.
Yeah, you presume as well that those claims that it was in the best interest of the FAI will stand up to scrutiny, and that's the point here, that people have asked exactly how it was in the best interest of the FAI and why it was in the best interest of the FAI. They've yet to really answer that, so it'll be interesting to see exactly what comes out of this review. And the language there is quite telling. They say reveal as if there is something to be revealed, which I think
But also, Darren, if you go back to this internal review, so who's going to carry out this review in an organisation that is clearly dysfunctional? So we're only hearing about this 100 grand on Sunday, something that they tried to stop us hearing. So who's going to carry out an internal review of what here?
Well, we can only, obviously, we don't know the details of that just yet. We can only assume that it's going to be carried out in good faith, and I'm 100% sure it will be. That's all we can assume right now until we actually get any more details from it. And
that's the assumption.
If there's any, I guess until they're actually properly scrutinised that Oireachtas committee next month, I think that we can only make the assumption that everything's going to be all fair and proper in the review there. There's questions to be asked, and the questions hopefully will get asked next month, and hopefully we'll have some sort of clarity. It depends how cynical you are and whether or not we'll actually get the clarity in the end, and that is down to the questioning next month.
But we can trust an internal review from an organisation that has withheld this information until now.
Well, we'll see. Do we have a timeline on the internal review? I don't think we have.
I think they may be talking about April.
Yeah, they completed all actions approved by early April.
Right. Well, that is it. That is the next step in all of this, and
everything will be grand by then.
Anyway. From all of that, it'll be interesting as well if we get another statement today. I'm sure you'll be able to bring us up to speed on that tomorrow morning, Darren.
We'll keep you up to date as well on the website offtheball.com. In the meantime, Zlatan Ibrahimovic claims that the Premier League is overrated. Ibrahimovic played 4 seasons in the Eredivisie, 7 seasons in Serie A, 4 in Ligue 1 and 1 season in La Liga. The striker also played for United, where he scored 17 goals in 28 games. Zlatan reckons that the technical quality of the Premier League is not near some of the big leagues he's played in Europe. He's told Mirror, It was exactly like I thought it was. He was very hyped. It was very intense. The pace was very high. It was good, but the quality is overrated. Overrated from a technical point of view, but it is high pace and intense, and if you cannot handle those two things, you cannot survive in the Premier League. Byrne O'Driscoll has urged Irish rugby fans not to panic as the fallout of the Poor Six Nations campaign continues. A brutal defeat to England was followed by unconvincing wins over Italy and Scotland. Ireland did overcome France and looked to be somewhat back to their best before losing to Wales last time out comprehensively. The Ireland legend feels all is not lost and reckons the conditions may have unsettled Joe Schmidt's charges.
The power plays are going to be pretty difficult to cut teams open in really greasy conditions. Rain and mud is a leveller, where wingers all of a sudden don't have that turn of speed against, back rowers or front rowers, where it reduces everyone down to a similar sort of level. So it becomes about who's up for the fight, and Wales weren't lacking in motivation for winning their third Grand Slam in Gat's tenure, and the confidence that'll give them bringing into the World Cup. So I think there were. All's not lost, but I think there were definitely some really disappointing aspects to what happened at the weekend, and from a selection point of view as well.
Now, Rory McIlroy says his Players' Championship victory felt like Christmas coming early. 4 back 9 birdies, key to the Ulsterman's success. He finished a shot clear of Jim Furyk to bridge a year-long wait for a win at TPC Sawgrass. This is McIlroy's first Players' Championship victory, his 15th on the PGA Tour. He explains how patience and a wise word of advice helped him claim victory.
I've been trying to stay as patient as possible, and I had a nice little chat with Dennis Pugh earlier in the week, and he said, it seems like you're waiting for Christmas, and Christmas is going to come, you just have to stay patient. And I said, that's actually a pretty good analogy, so I'll take that one for the week. And that's what it was like. It was sort of, it's going to come around at some point, you just got to stay patient and not force the issue, and that's what I did. I played great over the first 2 days, but especially the last 2 days over the weekend, 2 over through 2 yesterday, 2 over through 4 today. I didn't force the issue. I stayed patient. I knew I had some chances coming up, and I really feel like the last few weeks, it took all those experiences to get to this point, and finally was able to get over the line.
A bird described as the Lionel Messi of pigeons has been sold for a record price of €1.1 million at an auction. Armando the pigeon has a race record that has never been matched and attracted bids from countries around the world. The previous record for a bird sold in an online auction was €376,000. That was set in November. Nicholas Geiselbrecht, chief executive of the auction house Pippa, said the pigeon's race record made it so valuable. The bird has been described as the Lewis Hamilton of pigeons as well, but Mr. Geiselbrecht suggested that comparisons did not go far enough. I don't know how important Lewis Hamilton is in Formula 1. He said, is he the best ever? Maybe Schumacher. This pigeon is the best ever. And there's the pigeon's tail of the tape on the screen, if you can make any sense of that. But he's worth €1.1 million, and that is a list of his achievements for those watching across our lives.
I absolutely, I hate pigeons so much because, of the noise that they just bring to the table for me, where I wake up in the morning because outside, and they're
rats with wings.
They're rats with wings. They're very blasé on the street as well. They've obviously evolved such that humans just don't bother them anymore. They just kind of just nonchalantly get out of the way. But the noise levels, if you live in an apartment and there are kind of pigeons around, they really actually do. I think they're going to shorten my life.
They're terrible creatures, and it's an absolute disgrace that somebody's paid £1.1 million for one.
It's a disgrace that you had that in your news report this morning, I think, as well.
You got to have all transfer news. You can't discriminate against sports, and pigeon raising is a sport, Johnny.
That's fair enough.
Well, I appreciate the update, but still an absolute disgrace. Darren Cleary, thank you very much. We are turning back to rugby in just a moment because Alan Quinlan's in and he's going to pop in the studio for a quick chat. But speaking from Cardiff on Saturday afternoon, Andy Dunn was in good form. He believes Ireland's defeat highlights the flaws within Joe Schmidt's dictatorial setup.
I'd nearly absolve all the players at this stage of blame. I think the coaching staff are far too oppressive and they're far too dictatorial about the style of play with which we are being demanded to play week in, week out. And when we have an off day like we did against Italy, all the language that came out of the camp was we need to tighten up. When England lost to Wales, all the language that came out of their camp was we need to lighten up. We need to get our attack coach Scott Wiseman involved more. We need players to make brave decisions, to be creative, to take on risk. And England have gone and done that and showed that they can play in different ways. we've actually come back out of a poor day against England, a poor performance against Italy, and said we need to tighten up. We can't tighten up any further. We've tightened up to a degree that we've 130 plus rucks per match, and every international side knows it. And once they physically match us, we get battered and battered and battered and have no answer. And it's really, really difficult to watch brilliant players like Sexton have such an off day. And it seems to me that there's no scope for these guys to change and do something off the cuff on the field. Great teams like Fergie's teams with United, they lasted 20 years because Fergie didn't know what they were going to do at every single point and every moment on the field. And Schmidt seems to want to control 12 to 15 phases from the stand at all times. And he needs to reverse out of that fast, or he needs to give Andy Farrell a bit more input, or he needs to give Richie Murphy more input, and he needs to give his players more creative scope.
Yeah, Andy Dunn there with strong stuff in Cardiff on Saturday afternoon. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Good morning, all.
So Andy Dunn there basically making the point that he didn't absolve the players of blame, but basically their poor performances can be put down to the coaching staff and to Joe Schmidt in particular. What do you reckon?
Oh, Jesus, I don't know. It's look, he's making some. It's relevant to that we do. We recycle the ball a lot, and we keep building phase after phase. If anything, I'd say that we probably need to, when we meet a brick wall, just kick tactically better. Not necessarily with the box kick, just put Sexton back in the pocket and just thump the ball down the field. Wales did that with Biggar the other day. They played very little rugby against us. They just pressurised us. They get the early score, and they're building kind of pressure all the time. There's no doubt about it, we haven't coped well with pressure because we were so used to 2018 being on the front foot, and we do build a lot of phases because the team are very accurate. So when they hit the brick wall, they keep going over and back and over and back. And this idea and this, it's very easy to say, well, we build too many phases and we should play off the cuff more. You play off the cuff, you make mistakes, you get knocked backwards. I think this Irish team does try to play an expansive game. They try to move the ball a lot. I think we overplay, and I think attritionally that has an effect on us then and it has affected us in these matches that we've hit a brick wall and we've kept trying to do the same thing over. Whereas I think we need to play in different areas of the field and kick the ball better. And, someone said to me, we're not expansive, we're not ambitious. Well, what the hell did Johnny Sexton do with a crossfield kick to Jacob Stockdale? If they're afraid of the coach of doing that kind of stuff, well, why does he do that? We see him a lot do crossfield kicks, and a lot of them don't come to anything. We turn the ball over. So I agree. There's some parts of what he's saying are correct, and Andy's a very intelligent. He was a fly half, and most fly halves are there for a reason because they can see and they can read the game very well. So I don't think they're restricted in what their ambition to play and move the ball. I think we're very process based, and in fairness, we're very, very good at recycling the ball. And our ruck, it does probably have a toll, and because the players maybe are overplaying at times. And particularly in this tournament, we've worn teams down before. Should
that be an excuse from an Ireland perspective? I mean, we saw what happened against England, who have complained themselves about overplaying. Like, if you were talking about the taxing nature of our game on the bodies of the Irish players, well, the English players have a tougher time of it with the amount of minutes that they play and things like that. So why has it been a particular focus from an Irish perspective?
Well, it's just when the results are negative, people are kind of can pick out that stuff. And I think, look, without disagreeing with Andy, we do build a lot of phases, and it does have an attritional effect. I think we maybe at times I would criticise the team for saying that maybe we're overplaying at times, particularly in our own playing out of our own 22, that we should kick a little bit more. Dan Biggar comes on for Wales on Saturday and they kick the leather off the ball, and they're putting those pressure. At 16-0, it's easier for sure, but him coming on, George North going off, was actually a massive boost for Wales given the conditions, because he's a great tactical kicker, Biggar, and he's a very physical, abrasive player, whereas Anscombe has been picked throughout the tournament to give him a little bit more approach. He has that little bit of flair, extra flair, and he's a broken field runner. Even though Wales scored 10 tries in the tournament, Ireland scored 14. Last year we scored 20 tries. It was the biggest number of tries since 2001, when that group of English players went on to win a World Cup. So
does that tell the full picture though? Like, I mean, when you look at the statistics, like you say we've overplayed, and I think that's bang on when you look at the stats.
When I mean overplay, I don't mean we're like throwing the ball around willy-nilly. I mean we actually keep going from here to here to here to here to over and back.
Exactly.
And we do a lot, and there's a lot of work in it. You know, at times it slows down and we use the box kick scenario. I would rather see you know, sometimes when we get a little bit of a yard or two, and England did it really well against us, where Farrell is nearly taking the ball on the run, where he's punting into the corner, and Rog spoke about that a few times, where sometimes we keep playing too much. It's not as if Ireland are just one-out runners all day long. Like, they're trying to bring people in, they're trying to move the ball a little bit, and you know, the damage was done in the first game, and it continued, and it had an effect on the confidence of the side. I just think that there's a massive overreaction. You have to pick through it. But I just wonder how many people watched the game back, paused it, stopped, watched it, rewound, watched it again. There's very small margin in that game the other day. People are saying the players didn't turn up and the roof was the big issue and this was wrong and that was wrong and the team were finished. There's definitely 3 or 4 players in the team who are very, very vulnerable to being finished with the national side.
Who are those players?
Well, I think, you know, Sean O'Brien hasn't, and he didn't deliver on Saturday, and there was pressure on him to deliver. He's just got to get back with Leinster and try and find a run of games. Rory Best didn't play well on Saturday. You'll automatically kind of jump on that because of the age factor, which, you know, Rory's big enough to take that himself and understand that. Peter O'Mahony didn't play well. You know, Peter O'Mahony had 2 tackles, 2 carries. Josh Navidi 28 tackles or 26 tackles or something like that. He's opposite number. Is that down to him not working? No, it's not. It's down to him just having more of an influence and more of an effect for a top-class player. Sexton Murray didn't play well. So if Joey Carberry was fit, Dricko made the point last night on off the ball that, you know, if Carberry's fit, healthy and well, would he start next week? He probably could. And maybe some of them need something to happen or some bit of a dynamic to change. And maybe they're not coping well with pressure. Rob Kearney, you know, didn't play great at the weekend. Jacob Stockdale didn't play well. For me, Jacob Stockdale, right from the kickoff, he's got to come in field. You're talking about small moments. He gets tackled in the touch, they win the line-up, build a couple of phases, they get a penalty from a James Ryan side entry, which, when you watch it back, he clearly comes from the back of the ruck, back of the maul. It shouldn't have been a penalty. So then Garrett Anscombe gets the ball, knowing that he's a penalty coming, and then he puts in the dink kick and it works for him. They get another penalty and it's 10-0 up, and you just feel, this is just going to be very difficult because
especially on a day like that.
It's hard to wrestle it away. And then people are saying Joe should have said close the roof. It's all bullshit. The players wanted the roof open. They wanted to have a bit of an edge. Did they go out and not try? Did they not have desire? Did they not work hard? No, that's not true. They worked their socks off. They lost individual battles early on, and a few things went against them. And should they be criticised? Absolutely. They should be, because it's not just, it's as a whole, but are the team done? Are they finished? You know, maybe some players are, but not this group, and not Joe Schmidt, because I think he's too good a coach. He delivered 3 championships in 5 seasons for us, and suddenly he's the worst coach in the world, and he's negative, and he's this, and he's that, and this doesn't work. We need to evolve a little bit more, so he learned himself that we didn't cope well with this tag of, you know yourself, if you're on a team, and I don't know if you'll agree, Johnny, if you're the champions and you head to any venue to play the opposition and they're perceived weaker than you, they're going to kick the shit out of you if they get a chance. And sometimes really good teams and teams with with maybe no drop in mentality, or maybe Ireland dropped and maybe believed a little bit of the hype themselves. But you're going to have to deal with that. And so they didn't deal with it well. England came with their backs completely to the wall. If they lost,
England were 3-1 against to win that game.
Yeah, but I thought that was stupid. I thought England would put. I said before the game, I thought England would win the game on the day, on the Friday here, and I thought Ireland would win the game. But I just sensed a real desperation about them. And a lot of brilliant players in that English side. The two Vunipolos, the Toge, Tuolagi, all these guys, Farrell. So they've had a very good side, but they did the damage. You know, they got a good start in the game. That is a concern that we you know, if we don't get a good start, how do we cope?
It all points to kind of a bit of a mental lapse, does it, Alan? Like if you're saying that they can't cope with the favourites tag.
No, I'm not saying they can't cope with the favourites tag. They cope with the favourites tag down in Australia when they won a series. They cope with you know, pressure with New Zealand coming in November after.
So maybe it actually isn't that a big factor in the Six Nations?
No, it's not. I think the Six Nations there's very small margins, and I think the pressure and the mistakes kind of mount it, and then they struggle to get it back. And maybe, you know, so a lot of decisions went against them as well, and their luck deserted them a little bit. If you look at what Wales did, and this is not making excuses for Ireland, they were 16 points down in France, and they were dreadful. Wales were, and France were dreadful in the second half. Wales got two really lucky scores. They end up winning that game, and credit them because they showed a lot of character, and you can never question that group, that group, and particularly what they built 14 wins. They have a lot of resilience, a lot of character, and a lot of brilliant players, but by their own admission they were very lucky to get through that game.
That's the amazing thing, the winners write history, and they could have been big losers in this campaign if they'd lost that game.
Wales go to Italy, they make 10 changes. We had 7 or 8 changes going to Italy. We got a bonus point win. Wales won by the same margin and didn't get a bonus point, and there's not a word said about it. So it happens. If we weren't Grand Slam champions coming in here, would people be having the same hysteria, same reaction?
They might do, you know, like getting hockeyed in Cardiff. Like, I mean, ultimately it is judged on the scoreboard. Like, rightly you're delving deeper into it than the scoreboard. You can't just judge it on that. But ultimately it is too heavy.
How many people watched the game back and went through this stuff? I'm telling you, Saturday, it felt worse than England, but when I watched it back,
you felt better.
Yeah, because I think, like people said, Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton were useless. They were terrible. They've got to go. Conor Murray actually did quite well. Sexton made a couple of mistakes when the pressure went, like, you could see that the pressure really told, and he got angry, and it affected him the mistakes in the second half. But honestly, I don't think it's as bad as people make out.
If the 5 games they played, would they be happy with their performance in any of them?
The first half in France was superb.
The first half?
60 minutes, I'd say, 65
against
minutes.
a bad French side, really?
Yeah, probably, yeah. To be fair, well, they've proven they're bad because they were dreadful in Italy as well. The only good performance they had was against Scotland in Paris.
First half against Wales, maybe?
Yeah, the first half against Wales, I thought France were back, but they were dreadful in England, really, really poor in Twickenham. So, but we put them to the sword, and we were 26-0 up, and it could have been a lot more. We lacked, and maybe because of what had gone on in the previous matches, we lacked that killer kind of punch that we would have had before. But it's amazing how it can change very quickly. 12 months ago, we're in Twickenham, and we're incredible, we're phenomenal. We're heroes, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not sticking up for him for the sake of it here. I've proven in the past I'm not afraid to stick the boot in if it needs to, with you know, but you have to put it in perspective. Like, there is, and Joe will have to accept some criticism himself, and he will have to make some changes himself, and he will have to look at the personnel, and he'll have to sit down with his own coaches and say, right, this is the stuff that kind of went against us. This is where we didn't cope well. This is where mistakes happened, and they came from this kind of facet of pressure that we've had, and how do we cope better going forward? They don't have a lot of time, the frustrating part about it. So is it crisis? It is a little bit of a crisis because of the results and because of the high standards that the team have kind of created. But I think there's definitely an overreaction, and I think there's a few people, which is, you'll always have your online keyboard warriors who will criticise me for saying the refs' decisions were bad and this is what happened and this stuff didn't help. But also me saying that they don't hear me saying that Wales deserved to win the game anyway, and look, they were on the front foot and full of energy, they were much more accurate, but here's stuff that inhibited Ireland and just doesn't help when you're out on the field there, when these things start to mount and you feel there's a bit of injustice going on and there's some decisions, and then
whole world's against you then.
It just it kind of can slip very quickly, and then you have people saying, well, they're useless, they're this, they're that, this fella has to go. You got to get some perspective, so they have to be criticised when you're at the top like that. And it is a bit of a crisis at the moment, but I think they can bounce out of it. I think there's still there's a lot of young players who could easily come into this group. Scott Penny was brilliant for the under-20s in throughout the Grand Slam. He's someone who could come in. Caelan Doris, Joey Carberry could be your starting 10. Who knows?
What do you think? Like, is on a more likely basis, like Jack McGrath's return is a potential? Sean Cronin returning to the squad is a big potential. What are you thinking?
If they go and play well with their provinces, and I think what the Irish players need to do now is try and get their confidence back. And it's not. Sometimes it's not even confidence. It's just feeling good about yourself again, because you're disgusted and hurt and disappointed, and they've set themselves such a high standard. And I think that's what's affecting Johnny a little bit, because he's maybe trying to live up to that tag mentally of such high standards, and he was World Player of the Year. He tries so hard, he pushes himself onto incredible standards. Conor Murray, I would still say, needs to be sharper, because of, he hasn't a lot of games played. He's still a brilliant player. They're very important going forward. But does that mean they shouldn't be dropped if Carberry plays really well for Munster and starts to dominate? Or if Luke McGrath plays well, or Kieran Marmion or John Cooney? No, it doesn't mean that. But I just think that they've problems with regards the pressure and how do you deal with that. It sounds very simplistic for me, because going back to the original point from Andy Dunn saying that we do play a lot and we have to work incredibly hard. There's not many people will show us the tries we've scored off set plays and strike plays, which is off one phase. Why doesn't Andy show us all the tries we've scored in the last number of years where we've scored off the first phase with a brilliant strike? But what about Earl's try last week against France? There's been a load of them. The try off the line-out last year against England in Twickenham. When Stander scores under the post. Joe Schmidt has come up with these things. So that's not a mentality of a coach who wants to be negative and just keep the thing safe all the time. I do agree in a sense that I would like to see the players maybe take a bit more responsibility and take on their opposition a bit more with footwork and a bit more evasiveness. So there's a fine line and a balance. So, it is having an effect, maybe having all those phases, like, trying to go over and back and over and back. And then you have, listen, if I was playing against Ireland, I'd be the most cynical player you'd ever watch.
More cynical. He said that after the
You'd probably watch me and say, I hate him if he's wearing number 6 for Wales, because I would be offside, my leg will be in at the ruck, I'll be holding on to Murray, I'll be giving verbals, I'll be all over the place. And that's the stuff that Ireland need to probably get a bit more ruthless. You can't, the discipline in this modern game, you've got to be very careful, and Ireland are a very disciplined side, sometimes too disciplined, but they need to be a bit more confrontational with that wave of aggression that England brought. And the other side of this, Owen, is, and I'll say it, there is 3 or 4 players who are very vulnerable now and maybe need to be moved, drop back, and other guys put in ahead of them and let them fight them way into, not just into a World Cup team, but into a World Cup squad.
Is Carney among them?
Yeah, but Rob Kearney's under that for 3 or 4 years and he keeps responding. So sometimes when he goes bad, he comes back and responds and people go, Jesus, we need Rob Kearney. So, he's continuously have to do that over the years. Maybe Johnny Sexton has to do that for one game. Maybe Rory Best has to do it now. Maybe
Carberry being unavailable was a big blow as well, because we didn't have that.
Because look, Carberry can come on the field. He can go full back. He can go into the centre. You can bring him on. He can do something different. The conditions didn't help. I think the whole roof open and the conditions would have worked perfectly if Ireland got the 10 points ahead. So Saturday for me, there's a lot of, if you watch the game back, there's a lot of reasons as to why. And there's a lot of mistakes and a lot of refereeing decisions that went against them. That's not saying we would have won, because that's a superbly aggressive, intense, brilliant Welsh side. The damage is done in the first game.
Yeah, so you're saying not to panic just yet?
Well, we need to panic, but not to the levels people are suggesting.
Right.
Of course there needs to be panic. Good teams panic, and I'll finish by asking you, did Joe Schmidt say at any stage we're going to win a World Cup?
Well, it's true.
Did the players say at any stage they're going to win a World Cup? They're getting criticism from people who just want to criticise. They feel they're making themselves important by saying, the rugby is over-egged, it's over...
a lot of that.
Advertised, it's over. That's not the players'
I was
fault.
taken aback by the vilification of the
But
players,
that's
as
not
if
the
like
players'
they didn't.
fault,
It was
Johnny.
like as if they didn't even try.
They went online.
You want to go out there and try in
But
that
if
way.
they went online saying we're brilliant, we're going to win a World Cup, they keep their heads down.
Sounds
They
like the
work
media
incredibly
narrative or
hard.
something.
And look, at the end of the day, we have had a bad tournament. We've won 3 games. I just think the reaction is absolutely crazy, and some people are enjoying that.
I totally agree.
The players have never said they're going to win a World Cup. They've never said that we're the best team in the world. It's people outside. And then I have mates who do it myself who are big heads, and they, rugby this, rugby that, it's headlines here. That's not the players' fault, that's just the culture.
Don't get them going on tip hurling at the moment.
I know, yeah, well, Jesus Christ, what a weekend. Like Dublin beating us on Saturday, but at least Liverpool scraped through. And I had a few pints Saturday night in Cardiff and I saw Wolves beating United, so that kind of put a small smile.
And Scotland result as well, maybe.
3 of my mates were United fans I was watching it with, so it wasn't a good day for them.
Alan Quinlan, thanks a million for coming in. We'll, regardless of anything, like the quarter-final against whoever it may be, is going to be a tough encounter, so I'll definitely go along with you on that one. I would just tell you this, on Wednesday the 27th of March, we're going to be live from the Olympia for the first Off the Ball Roadshow of the year, and it's in association with Heineken Rugby Club. There will be 3 provinces fighting it out for 4 Heineken Champions Cup semi-final positions, I should say, and joining us on the night will be some Heineken Cup legends, including Wallabies coach Michael Cheika. We'll also be giving everyone there on the night the chance to win a trip to the Heineken Champions Cup final. It's the latest Off the Ball Roadshow in association with Heineken Rugby Club. Tickets are priced €15, excluding booking fee, and you can get them at offtheball.com/events. It's an over 18s event only. Drink Heineken sensibly and visit drinkaware.ie. Now we're turning our attention to football, and Daniel Harris is with us on the line. Good morning to you, Daniel.
Hello.
So Zlatan Ibrahimovic is plastered across the back pages of the Star and the Mirror this morning. They both deem it as an exclusive. The same journalist has actually got the piece in both newspapers. So the shadow of Alex Ferguson is one of the big talking points we want to touch on here, because he says he wouldn't like to have Ferguson around if he was Manchester United boss. He says that everything that happens at Manchester United is judged by the era of Ferguson. They are saying if Ferguson was here, this would not happen. Ferguson would not do it like that. And this overarching idea that Alex Ferguson can sometimes be a negative influence around Manchester United by just being there is touted once again by Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I'm not sure if that's something you'd go along with.
No, not really. Not unless you're a dripping wet pussy. I mean, I don't really see that. Sorry, I can't really say that, can I?
You've just said it.
That all came over me. No, basically, I think it's interesting because if you look at the what happened before Fergie in the Matt Busby era. In the Matt Busby era, he then left and moved upstairs, and the managers who came after Busby complained about the way that Busby interfered in things, and definitely he did. The players were still Busby's players when Wilf McGuinness was the manager, when Frank O'Farrell was the manager, and they went sneaking to Busby when things weren't as they liked, and O'Farrell got fired, and McGuinness got fired. And the first manager to make a success of managing United was Tommy Docherty, who was tapped up by Busby to take over from O'Farrell, but who then had the strength of personality to actually get on with it and be his own man and do his own thing. He obviously later fell foul of Busby by slipping the physio's wife, which cost him his job. But the fact remains that he had that personality. And then the other people who made successes of it at United, Dave Sexton was another kind of quite quiet, reserved character, and it didn't work for him. Then it semi-worked for Ron Atkinson, who was someone else who came in and actually had the force of personality, not always the right force of personality, but the force of personality to not be worried about what had gone before him. And then when Fergie came in, he appreciated Busby being around, and people forget that Fergie was quite cowed by the experience in the first place. He would walk around saying to players, big club this. So he understood that there was pressure in how it was, but he also decided to make it work for him. So he decided to use the fact that he had this football genius in the office down the corridor, and he would go and ask Matt Busby for guidance and for advice. And similarly, I think one of the reasons Fergie employed Moyes, because let's be honest, there weren't many, was because partly he felt that he would be able to exert some control, because Moyes would be grateful to Fergie for giving him a job he'd done absolutely nothing to earn. And then he would obviously come and ask Fergie for advice because he was David Moyes and Alex Ferguson was Alex Ferguson. So why wouldn't he do that? Turned out he didn't really do that. He came in and fired the backroom staff, and that was sort of the first of a catalogue of errors that ended with him getting fired before the end of the first season. Then the next two guys, Van Gaal and Mourinho had very specific ideas about how they wanted to do things, weren't really willing to compromise and take guidance, and their way of doing things was quite different from Fergie's way of doing things, and they failed. And so now we've got Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who probably was put in place by Fergie partly. It seems unlikely that Ed Woodward or any of the rest of the board were watching mould, thinking, this guy looks like he might be quite good. And again, if you have the opportunity to ask someone for guidance, why would you not have the self-confidence in your own ability to make the correct decisions after seeking that guidance? To not ask people for advice on key decisions, you've got to be an idiot. And you've got to have the self-confidence in your own force of personality and your own ability to separate the good advice from the bad advice and be your own man. And I think that that's quite a crucial part of doing any job well, but particularly a job like being Manchester United manager. So having Alex Ferguson around should be good. Like I mean, you can look at it from your own professional perspective. If I'm writing a big piece, I've got people that I show it to because I respect other people's opinions and I back my judgment to then make the correct decision based on the advice that I get. And if you don't do those things, you're just too far up your own arse and an idiot.
You're not managing a football team, though.
No, you're not managing a football team, but managing a football team is hard. You've got a lot of personalities, you've got a lot of moving parts, you've got a lot of egos, and you've got a lot of different opponents who are trying to stop you doing the things that you want to do. Most managers have assistants. They have directors of football. They have trusted players. They might have a leadership group. Lots of big teams, we hear this increasingly in professional sport. There's a leadership group. And so part of it is about empowering people to take authority almost away from yourself, like empowering the players to make decisions. Wayne Rooney, when he was on Monday Night Football on Sky, said that if United went down to 10 men or something, Fergie wouldn't tell them what formation to play or what to do. He'd leave it to the players to get on with it. And that's sort of the other side of the same coin, seeking advice from people who are good and having the self-confidence in the people that you pick to get on with doing their job. Fergie wasn't on the training pitch a lot towards the end of his career because he trusted himself to pick the right people, to delegate to them and for them to do their job. René Merlenstein was actually writing about this on the Coach's Voice website just recently, that Fergie trusted the people that he picked to get on with doing their job. He would make the overall decisions, but he wouldn't micromanage and do everything. And actually, one of the places I think Arsene Wenger went wrong towards the end was that he did everything himself. He didn't delegate, and no one knows everything about everything. So Wenger famously didn't really drill defending, and what was one of the weaknesses of his Arsenal teams towards the end when he didn't have George Graham's back four and he didn't have Sol Campbell was their defending. Fergie wasn't an expert in drilling defending, so he didn't do it. He got Carlos Queiroz to walk the back four through their moves over and over again to the point of intense boredom and fury. But they then won the Champions League, conceding hardly any goals in the knockout stages. So no one knows everything. And so to have these great figures around, you see it in Bayern Munich, and they're doing all right. They have great figures running their club. And I'm sure those guys are around for the managers to seek advice from if they want it. Michael Vaughan, to take a cricketing example, I can't remember who it was, but he had two people, one cricketing and one not cricketing, who he went to seek advice when he was basically running the England team. And it's always important to look at what other people do and see how you can learn from other people, whatever job you do. I mean, it might work if you don't do it that way, but that's probably the best way of doing it. Look at the Anfield boot room. A bunch of people, led by a manager, but a bunch of strong characters with strong opinions to make it work.
Yeah, I think there's a great maturity and a great sense of security in yourself if you are able to go and seek advice from other people. And I think that's something that football and all other sports can definitely get better at. And also another thing which is quite striking from the noises coming out of Old Trafford over the last couple of days is football's relationship with failure, because Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has done an interview with a Norwegian paper, and he says that it was always in the back of his head that it was his dream job. But after what happened in Cardiff, I put this happening out of my mind. And I do wonder, Daniel, if we're very, very quick to judge a manager after one failure. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes the people who were still backing David Moyes were proved wrong after what he did post-Manchester United. But in some cases, like in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, those people would have been proved very, very wrong.
Failure is, a central part of sport and life. We all fail at stuff all the time. And specifically in sport, certain people are equipped for certain jobs, but not necessarily for other jobs. So Fergie failed at St Mirren. And Aberdeen was very good for his personal characteristics of being this motivational genius and having a really good eye for a player. That worked really well for him. And eventually United worked really well for him as well. But it's not necessarily the case that if he'd have got different jobs, he'd have succeeded at those, because maybe he would have needed to be like, he wasn't a tactical genius. He was interested in tactics and he was quite good at them. He wasn't a tactical genius, but maybe if he'd have been in a job where he didn't have such good players, the tactical element would have been more important. If Pep Guardiola had started his career at Huesca or Getafe or wherever, not with the greatest midfield of all time and Lionel Messi, then maybe his career would have gone differently. But he was the right man in the right place at the right time. Pep Guardiola's genius is extracting the most from elite level talents. There may be other facets to that genius that we don't know about. So maybe he could go to Leicester and make them title winners. Maybe he could go to Everton and get them regularly in the Champions League. We don't know that, but as far as we know, he's got this very specific genius that works in a very specific format that the likelihood is it probably wouldn't work somewhere else. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, to go back to that example, he wasn't the right guy for Cardiff because he inherited a team mid-season that had been managed by Malky Mackay, and they were doing okay. They looked like they were probably going to avoid relegation, but they also looked like, when you looked at the squad, probably the worst amongst the worst three squads in the league. And he tried to get them to play football in the middle of a season where they were doing all right by not playing football. And it didn't work. And he went away from that experience and he learned from it. Now, it doesn't mean he's the right manager for Man United just because of that. But yeah, like if you fail at doing one thing, it doesn't mean that there's this other similar thing that's actually also quite different that you won't be able to do several years later after you've learned from your failures and improved.
The last thing we wanted to get you on, Daniel, is just ahead of the international break, the cheapness of caps in the year 2019, because you had a good tweet the other day saying that it's mad how little you have to do to actually win a cap these days. You mentioned Lee Sharp winning a lot of trophies before he actually got his first cap, and then Hudson-Odoi, in contrast, has made 8 league appearances, 0 starts, and is yet to score. Would that be one of the cheapest caps handed out by England?
It's pretty cheap, but at the same time, I also said in that same tweet that I don't know if this is a bad thing. Because, first of all, it means that, it's kind of necessary in this era because there aren't as many English players knocking about. So it's partly a product of the Premier League. But also, it means that there's less security of tenure for people that aren't getting it done and better, more quick promotion. So what you've got is Gareth Southgate. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to build a team. So they see a player like Callum Hudson-Odoi. And rather than saying, have you made an unarguable case for your inclusion? He's saying, do I think that you're a talent and a player that I can go forward with, and so if that's the case, you may as well integrate someone sooner rather than later. And it's long been a criticism of British sport, and not just football, in cricket as well. Like when Sachin Tendulkar came through at 17, people used to say that if he was English, he wouldn't be anywhere near the Test team at 17 because they'd just be waiting for him to prove the talent that everyone already knew that he had. And it's long been a criticism of British sport that we don't put people in at the right times. And actually, even like Paul Scholes is another good example. Paul Scholes was playing for United from 94-95, and he didn't get picked for England until the summer of 1997 when he won 2 league titles. And he's also a brilliant talent who you must have been able to find room for before. So it doesn't, getting a cheap cap, and I don't think Hudson-Odoi is necessarily the cheapest. Tom Cleverley, I remember getting a very, very cheap one as well after he'd done almost nothing. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's the wrong thing, because it might mean that you've got a manager who's saying, well, I've got a first team. I know roughly what the first team is, but I've got these other players, places in the squad, players who aren't probably going to start, but might be good options off the bench or who should be around to learn so that they'll grow as part of the squad, not just as footballers, but like they'll become involved in like the patter and and just the relationship the squad has with each other, and players who thinks are going to be around for the next 5 to 10 years. Then it makes sense to get them in ahead of someone else who's not really going to play. And so I wasn't necessarily criticising the decision to pick Hudson-Odoi. I was just really pointing out the difference between how things are now and how things used to be. And because Lee Sharp had to do a lot before he got his debut. But actually, what I remember thinking at the time, admittedly, I was a child, was that Lee Sharp should have been in the England squad first. It's not always this England squad great. It's taken them so long to pick Lee Sharp because that England squad wasn't great. It's more that actually it was all right, but it's more that why hasn't Lee Sharp been picked before? When you see someone tearing it up in the league. And now, obviously, Hudson-Odoi hasn't torn it up in the league at all, and makes you think that someone somewhere is getting something wrong, because you've got Bayern Munich who want to buy him, you've got Gareth Southgate who wants to pick him, and you've got Chelsea who are struggling to score enough goals, and Sarri doesn't want to pick him. So someone's getting something wrong. But it's just, I think it's probably, on balance, things changing for the better, that caps are cheap. It's just international football, I guess, isn't viewed as an end in itself anymore. It's just viewed as something that happens rather than something that you have to work towards. You don't have to do very much, certainly if you're English, to get into the squad. I mean, you have to do more if you're German and more if you're Italian usually. But if you're English, you don't have to do more. And that's quite nice, because one of the things that people enjoyed about Gareth Southgate's squad in the summer was the freshness. And, I mean, can anyone say that Jadon Sancho hasn't done a lot in the game, but he's torn it up for half a season in the Bundesliga? Is that not enough to get into the English squad? I think on balance it probably is.
Daniel Harris, great stuff. Thanks, Millie. We'll chat to you soon.
No, I'll see you again.
Daniel Harris there on the line as we look ahead to the international break. And I should say there as well, if anyone was offended by Daniel's terminology at the start of the piece, we do apologise. Cheapest cap handed out?
Lee Sharp wasn't that bad of a player, in fairness.
But I mean, what's the cheapest cap that you remember being handed out?
Wow, that's did Pat Scully get an Ireland cap back in the day? Pat, who was actually a very good manager, real old school manager, who's kind of faded out of League of Ireland circles. It's too early in the morning to even think. What are you thinking?
I'll leave you mull over that one. I'm not sure. I was just asking for your view on it, because we are going to turn to golf. And Mystic Kieran Donaghy was on the show on the Off the Ball Shot Clock last week, and he saw this coming.
Rory McIlroy has been in the top 10 fairly relentlessly over the last couple of months. He started the season well. He hasn't started the season really well, but it looks like he's back in some level of form, except when he's in the final pairing on the final day. You think he's about to come good. What the hell is wrong with you, Kieran?
No, I just had this feeling in the pit of my stomach that...
it's indigestion.
Yeah, it's indigestion. I think he's playing well, and I think this Sunday blip is... I don't think it's an actual issue. I just don't think he's playing well. I really don't think he's suffering from nerves on a final day, or he doesn't have the temperament for it. I just have a feeling that he's never really performed in the Players' Championship. It is the 5th major. He wants to lay down a marker this year. He's been knocking on the door the last few tournaments. He's 11-1. Get on McIlroy for the weekend.
I just think that there is something there at the moment that's wrong with McIlroy when it comes to... It's not choking, because obviously he's getting himself in position over the course of the rest of the week, but if he's 3 strokes back on the final round and he's like out an hour and a half before the final pairing, then I would give him actually more chance of winning than if he was 2 shots clear and in the final pairing. I think that there is a psychological thing there at the moment, that he hasn't dealt with some of the ghosts from... I would say from Augusta. I know he's had big performances since then.
Yeah.
And I know he's won since then. But like when that is there, that's always there.
It's always there until you bust it open, and I think he's going to do it this Sunday. I'd love to see him in the final group.
I don't think he's busted open until he wins at Augusta. I think that's that ghost that always haunts him, tapping him on the shoulder, going, remember you discovered an area of the course that nobody even knew existed at Augusta, Rory? Remember that? That's in you.
Yeah. That was a very mentally challenging one to take, I would say, that last, but as you said, he's won big tournaments since then, and his game is just that drive he hit on the 17th last week. It was just ridiculous, and I just think he's going to just hit that note of form.
Yeah, great call from Kieran Donaghy there on the shot clock last week, saying that Rory McIlroy was going to go out and win at Sawgrass, and win he did. John Duggan, a very good morning to you.
Owen and Johnny, how are we doing?
All good. Welcome back from Shetland as well, by the way.
Thank you.
Nobody surprised by this, I don't think. Maybe there was questions about the mental fortitude of the previous week, and what was it, of the previous 13 times he'd been in the final pairing or something like that. He hadn't managed to get the business done. You said on the 5th of January this is going to be Rory McIlroy's year, so I dare say you're not one of those people who had massive questions about him going into Sawgrass.
No, I've been watching golf a long time, and I really believe that natural talent in golf is everything. And if you can apply that generally from time to time, you're going to be better than the opposition just through sheer ability. And Rory McIlroy is probably the most talented golfer to emerge since Tiger Woods. He had 4 majors in the locker at the age of 25. He was expected to have double-digit number of majors. It hasn't happened, but that doesn't rule him out of the equation regarding winning big tournaments and then going through these waves of coming out of bad results and then going on a massive streak. So 6 tournaments this year, 6 top place finishes in the top 6. And the way he applied himself on Sunday was different. He seems to have got a lot of self-help in the last 6 to 7 months, read a lot of self-help literature. And you could see it through his demeanour, was a much more zen and calm. It's not the Ryder Cup McIlroy, can we hear you? It's okay, I'm going to take a bunker approach in the 15th, absolutely clean hit it beautifully, sink the putt and just move on to the next hole. And also recovering from a double bogey on 4 conditions were difficult. It's not necessarily a course all grass that he's prospered on before, and this to me is very positive for his prospects at Augusta, because I think if he can get over that line at Augusta, I think he's been beating himself up too much. And one really interesting quote that I read in his press conference was that how he banks information from previous tournaments when he goes into new tournaments. So 18. This is the 18th hole when he needed a 4 to win the tournament, a par. He's driving the ball over water at Sawgrass. We've all played this on PlayStation. Not very well. I haven't anyway. 18 tee shot was the one that was probably the most difficult shot I had all day, knowing I had a 4 to win. I just picked my target. I stepped up. I just made a committed swing. And the way golf works, the way I've always done, this goes back to the Hong Kong Open in 2008. I had a chance to win there. I was really uncomfortable with the 18th tee shot all week. And the last hole was a 3-wood. I just said to myself, if you make a good swing at this, no matter what happens, I don't believe in anything really, but I think the golf gods will reward you for just making a good committed swing. And anytime I've got a tough tee shot, I stand up, I pick my target, and I swing as hard as I can. And usually it works out because you've committed to it, you've got a clear head. And the last 2 days, I piped it down 18 by just remembering that tiny thing from Hong Kong 10 years ago. That's pretty impressive stuff to read.
It's remarkable, but what are you thinking in the middle of that shot before you know that the ball is safe? Like, is there not like a moment?
What am I thinking as a fan, or what's he thinking?
As a fan, like, are you not thinking to yourself, what are you doing? Are you like to play a less aggressive shot here?
I'm thinking the strength of McIlroy's game is his driving. There's never really been an issue with the exosets that he launches from the tee. The issue has been with the flat stick and the putter. It's streaky, it's hot and cold. Brad Faxon, one of the best putters on the US Tour history, has been working with McIlroy, not in a really you're my coach way, but in a kind of a mentor advisory way over the last year. They catch up regularly. So his putting stats were in the middle of the pack, but he's just so good tee to green. And when he gets into a groove, McIlroy, you see his body language change. You see the swagger, you see the way he walks differently. And I could tell once he birdied 15 with that bunker shot, that 17, the island shot, and the 18th would be negotiable. I'm not in any way surprised by Rory McIlroy's resurgence. People going, oh, he had a bad year, he this, he that. Natural talent is everything in golf. Tiger Woods came back from everything to win. Was it the Tour Championship? And be a part of the conversation again in his 40s with all the back surgery he's had. Natural talent will be everything in golf. And McIlroy, I think in the Masters, has finished top 10 in each of the last 5 years. So he'll definitely be part of the chat. Whether his putting and a short game will be good enough under pressure. And I think that's why what's interesting about him is obviously with his wife, with his coach, Michael Bannon, and with his caddy that he's been defending, Harry Diamond, who was a very good amateur golfer, that he seems to have a team that he's comfortable with at the moment that can propel him to future success. And I think, as I said, if the Masters, if he gets over that hump, how many can he win? Because he'll have the set then, and only 5 golfers have done it in history.
The thing is, Sunday's win was a marvellous win, and you're bang on, I think, when you say that he's got a kind of a new outlook in terms of being a more zen character, that we won't see the sort of fist-pumping Rory McIlroy that we used to see. Like, he was saying that the win is just another step on the journey, that he's been preaching perspective. I feel like I've got a pretty good handle on the perspective. He says it's a glimpse. My career is hopefully going to last another 15 or 20 years. So one tournament or one day or 1 month in those 20 years is nothing. It's just a glimpse. Whereas previously it felt like that one day or that one round could be everything to Rory McIlroy. His attitude has changed quite dramatically.
I think I read somewhere about him that he, if it was like the last day or the best day of his life, golf would not be part of that. I think he's been able to do in this instance. Now, whether the old demons might resurface or whatever around Augusta, we don't know. But he's been able to separate golf from his personal life. And he was talking about having an interior designer around on Monday. he's trying to separate, okay, this is my golf, this is my office, and then this is my personal life and what I'm trying to do out of that. And I think maybe he's been beating himself a little bit up too much, but he's had these phases before. In 2013, he walked off Muirfield, the British Open, and said he was brain dead. A year later, he won 2 majors in a row at the British Open. He won that tournament a year later, and then he won the PGA. Now, I think why we've been questioning McIlroy is we expected him to be the Woods figure. We expected him to be winning majors every year. He hasn't won a major in 5 years. That's why your putting is off. You haven't lived up to your potential. But ultimately, golf works in waves. Phil Mickelson didn't win a major until he was 34 years of age, and he's one of the greatest golfers of this generation. He's won 5 major championships. He's won every major apart from the US Open. And I think McIlroy, it'll be fascinating to see how he plays at Augusta. If he can get off to a good start, say the Thursday, Friday, shoot in the 60s, how will he then play the weekend?
Are you backing him?
I backed him last year. He put a great for 3 days, and the last day, his head dropped. Will this new approach psychologically change the way he looks at things? I will be backing him, yeah.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating couple of weeks. It's going to be a brilliant Masters. But the thing is as well with Rory McIlroy, people who call him bottlers. What was your statistic there? That it's been a top 10 finish in the last 5 Masters consecutively.
Yeah.
Like, to actually get yourself into that position, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like the parallel between the current Liverpool situation. Is it a bottle job if Liverpool don't win the Premier League? No, it's not.
No, not this season.
Getting yourself into the top 10 consistently in the Masters, is that really conducive to suggesting that somebody is a bottler? Personally, I don't think so at all.
Well, Jim Furyk in 2003 won the US Open. He'd been in the top 10, I don't know, I backed him about 15 times, and then he won, and he played great as well, and so that was a great story. That could have been a great redemption story. But you even see like players like John Ram making mistakes. I don't know if you saw that viral with him and his caddy disagreeing over something, and then he put it in the drink. Triumph through adversity is probably the only thing McIlroy needs to bring to his game, and we saw that on Sunday, and that's very positive for him, that he has that cojones, as I would call it. As I said to somebody, I think this morning, like, that was the scallops. The Masters is the steak. Maybe Port Royal should be the creme brulee, as somebody said to me on Twitter.
Well, it's a fairly palatable couple of months coming up for Rory McIlroy there. Say, John Duggan, thanks a million for popping in. Johnny Ward, thank you for popping in this morning. The next episode of The Shot Clock, I should say, by the way, with Kieran Donaghy is this Thursday on OTBAM, so stay tuned for that, and more predictions again, hopefully. Off the Ball then is back in your radios tonight from 7 o'clock, and we're back here tomorrow on OTBAM from 7:45am, and Off the Ball social channels. We'll have the Tide 5, the latest from the Irish football camp, and much, much more besides. We'll see you then. Bye-bye for now.